Everybody, please help me welcome Dan Petrovic. He's here from beautiful downtown Australia, Brisbane, to talk to us about CTR optimization, and he's got some little perks to his presentation that I think it'll make it real interesting. Dan, welcome. Thank you for being here. Looking forward to hearing your show.
Thank you very much. So let's get started. Now, we're going to kick things off with a sort of a case study. Not exactly a client of mine, but a website that is an e-commerce store like many others that has a unique challenge in targeting its customers because of its unique but high value product. So we're talking about quantumlevitation.com and what seems like a normal e-commerce store. But when we go to their products, we see that they're not exactly cheap and they're not exactly normal, what you would consider a normal e-commerce product. Yet, SEO is important, optimization is important, keyword research is important, CTR optimization is important as well. So yeah, for today, we're just gonna show you what it is. So we've got a tiny little thing that looks like that, and that is what we call a superconductor. It's interesting because it has zero electrical resistance, and it does some strange things when supercooled to minus 178 degrees. So what we're going to do is just pour some liquid nitrogen into the cup. I hope you're already entertained. I'm going to wait for it to be cooled to a certain temperature so I can actually show you the product in action. Now, interesting thing about this is that once locked in, you can see this object hover in the air. Can everyone see that properly?
Yes.
Yes, so I can kick it on top and it just stays like that. So it's just floating in the air. Now, people could think, oh, well, that's just magnet hovering above. But you can also turn it sideways or upside down. It just stays like that. It's like magic. So this is the type of product that we're dealing with. Quite unusual. And if put on a circular magnetic field, it can be rotated around just like that. So what I'll do, I'll just put it above the field like that so you can see it. So we've got an interesting product at hand. So let's move on with our slideshow. What do we do with this? In the shopping cart, we've got 37 products and 525 queries. We've got a whole bunch of queries that we would like to optimize our CTR for. And one of the key things we got to do here is consider their click-through rate. So here's one. YBCO superconductor for sale. It ranks number one. Its click-through rate, let's assume, is 30%. Then we've got a second query. Superconductor kit ranks number one. Click-through rate is 50%. Same position, 30%, 50%. So you're already wondering what's going on. So one of our first steps is to actually just add them up, average them out, and come up with what our average click-through rate is. So this is not exactly a complicated activity. You can do it in an Excel spreadsheet. And you want to repeat that process across all of your queries and average them out so you can come up with an average click-through rate. Now, let's take a look at all of our queries. Now, this is just a part of the list. The list, of course, continues to everything else. And one of the first things we have to consider when doing research for click-through rate optimization is some keywords just don't apply. So what are the types of queries that we want to remove from our research? And what does this mean? Why are we doing click-through rate optimization? We want to get more clicks from the same rankings. People in PPC industry do this all the time, but SEOs tend to sort of just chase the rank and not really focus on improving the amount of clicks that they get from the same rankings. So why did I cross out all these queries here? Well, here's the explanation. When we're running calculations for our averages, we have to consider that branded queries will have abnormally high click-through rates, and they can skew our statistics, and we have to remove them out of our calculation. Similarly, we have a guy called Boaz Almog, who is the company owner. We don't want his name to be skewing the CTR calculation, so we'll remove that and any other similar types of things. It could be a product, sub-product, a brand. It could be research queries going to your blog. You could be segmenting your research away from your products to your blog and vice versa. And there could be all sorts of queries that don't have any commercial intent. Let's have a look. So quantum physics science fair projects. This is people just researching things and they just want to see cool stuff, not necessarily ready to buy your product. So the behavior on this level is very different to what somebody that is looking for a superconducting levitation kit, because that's a very intent-oriented query for somebody who is looking to buy. And you can't get any more obvious than superconductor for sale, for example. That's just like, yes, give it to me. I want to buy it. So if this at this point is all a little bit abstract, I'll just explain visually for those who like to see it on screen. Here's your click-through rates before adjustment when you factor in everything. And here's what happens once you do the adjustments. So your expectations tend to be quite different before and after. So just to summarize, what did we do? We looked at all of the queries and we've removed branded queries of other brands, non-commercial intent queries, research queries, everything else. We could have similarly run a separate analysis on your blog versus analysis on commercial products. So slicing and dicing your data set to produce different types of CTR optimization analysis can be quite useful. Next step for us is to detect outliers. So we've got two queries, hypothetical queries, quantum floating. So we've got the expected click-through rate of 15, and the actual click-through rate is 12. So we've got a difference of minus 3% click-through rate, and that's an informative thing. Now, we've got another query, quantum floating, in a different scenario. That's perhaps we expected CTR of 6 on that position, but we got 12. So it's got plus 6% click-through rate. So what's going on? When it appears on position 2, it's got 1 CTR, and then it appears on position 5, it's got another CTR. So the next step in the methodology is to calculate the lost and gained traffic. And this is actually not that hard. So we're factoring in our impressions and actual CTR, and then we're subtracting the expected CTR, and then we're getting our losses or gains. So once we do that, we're able to do the next step. We've got our outperformers and we've got our underperformers. But this red thing is an underperformer and that's an overperformer. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to learn from both. What's so bad about this snippet? What appeared in the search results to bring our CTR down so much? And what happened here that we want to apply? So whatever you learn from this group of queries, you want to eliminate and remove. And whatever you learn from this group of queries, you want to do more of. So once we've calculated all our CTRs, we can see the winners and losers, and we can map them to their queries, to the queries to the URLs. So what's happening here? Well, of course, 3 or 4 or 10 or 100 queries could land on the same page in search results. So you have the opportunity to map your queries to a specific URL. And what does that mean? Well, you can give that URL a cumulative score. So basically, we have a URL-based traffic loss and gain. So we've got query 1 and query 2 difference and query n difference, and we add up all those differences and we come up with URL list that has a sum of all its search query click-through rate based losses and gains. So you can sort that list as a spreadsheet and come up with URLs that have amazing click-through rates. Those are the URLs you can learn from. What did you do? What happens in the snippets? And most importantly, from the list in the red, it's like, wow, what's so bad about this URL? What did we do? Where did we screw up? So we get, minus. We've lost 100 clicks just because something is bad out of with that query. So once we've determined the winners and losers, we are in the business of pattern detection, and this can be a little bit tricky in some instances because there can be a lot of false positives and things constantly shift and change. But let's start from the most obvious starting point. You just do a manual visual inspection and you try to figure out what's going on with those results. So maglev kit is one of their queries. So we're doing the visual inspection. We're saying, okay, well, interesting thing. We've got special formats going on. We've got some extra information in there, which might make this CTR a bit more interesting to click on. We've got the dimensions in there and we've got the price. So this could actually impact it negatively as much as positively. So we want to consider the CTR deviation from the norm for this URL to figure out whether this helped or it didn't. Now, we have to keep in mind that this is not just one factor. This is a multi-factor situation where we have numerous elements on the search result page influencing the click-through rate. For example, the presence of ads or knowledge graph or any special SERP features like with these answers there that we have that people also ask, the accordion feature. So visual inspection only goes so far, but it can be useful, not just to show us the context of this snippet, inform and perhaps inspire some experimentation, but also just to consider the bread and butter type stuff, title and description content. What did I put in there? What did I put in there? What actually showed up in there? Because we know Google can do a heavy amount of rewriting in certain instances. And was it something that I did or is it something that Google did? Now, another factor to consider is how strong are your competitors? So that's you, that's your competitors. So you're up against Amazon. Amazon could actually take away from your clicks purely because of the strength of their brand when people recognize them more than you. Now, an interesting thing is that I'm in Australia and this is an Australian website and I'm seeing maglev kits from Australia. I'm thinking fast shipping, reliable customer service. This might as well be the overriding factor for me. Yes, these guys hold the number 1 position and number 2 position, and this is a very big brand. But these guys are Australian and local, so that in Australia they might actually get 40% click-through rate on position 4, which would be anomaly, which would be a deviation. Now, of course, that would only work when running a research for that specific country. So one powerful thing you can do as a little bit of an advanced tactic for this type of calculation is adding your own arbitrary scoring. The reason I call it arbitrary is because I personally don't use the same scoring for all of my clients. It's always a custom model and where I have the opportunity to tweak the values for each individual feature in the search results. And what did I actually just say? Well, if we have a look at this URL here. That's the actual URL with the segment. The SERP mode was that it's a featured snippet. So you click on it, you got to that exact spot in the article. And competing results had shopping, thumbnails, featured snippets. People also asked, top stories, and video. So that has a lot. This is the actual data. There was a lot of competing stuff there that could have negatively impacted the CTR. And there was one element, at least one element, that we kind of control that helped us. So here's how your arbitrary scoring could work. So this is the list of all the stuff, and this is simply an Ahrefs export. So when you export the queries from Ahrefs, it actually gives you the SEP features in the column K, and you actually get to see what type of SEP features appeared alongside you, and it can tell you if you are featured in any way. So we can see that this URL showed as a featured snippet. Every other URL did not. So what do we do with that information? We assign, again, arbitrary 20 points to us being a featured snippet. And what do we do with that? We increase the likelihood of this being the cause of the CTR improvement. And then we adjust the competing results, factoring in shopping, thumbnail, etc., by assigning -5 points. Each one of these could negatively impact our performance in the search results because there's a shiny things in the search that just detract from people looking at you. It's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And you're just like one of those features that's raised its hands to grab attention. So obviously I just put 20 points and 5 points, but you can play and tweak with these figures to create powerful projections that are suiting your own situation. Now, you could go a little bit further. If we reflect on one of the previous slides and we talk about the content of our title and the content of our description, we can try to do this manually. And you might be able to do that manually if you have like 40 products. But if you have 500 products or 10,000 products, no way you can do that. So you have to run some sort of text analysis. And of course, the best way to do that is to run your own tools. If you don't have them, you can subscribe to commercial grade tools that do text analysis for you. Or you can use free tools like Voyant. They're not as good, but they are pretty informative in terms of inspiring research. So what do we have here? We have detection of possible CTR boosters, things like deals, best. And we also have a correlation table. So what are we doing with the correlation table? We're trying to find in a mass of different keywords that we have in our titles and descriptions. Across thousands and thousands of our descriptions and titles, when something appears in there, it tends to skew the CTR towards negative. If something else appears in there, it tends to skew the CTR towards positive. So the correlational tables can help you quickly visualize absence or presence of certain terms that may have impact on CTR increase or decrease by simply being there. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's just about words. This could be presence of special characters. I've seen in the past and working with certain projects that adding a little TM for trademark or a registered trademark sign or putting a $sign or some other feature can actually have a positive impact on the CTR. And some other special characters like emojis you think would have positive impact actually had negative impact. So everything that's a hypothesis need to be put to testing. And everything that we've gone through so far is simply getting ready and gearing up, informing yourself to run actual tests. This is what it's all about, running tests. You can't just guess things. Just like you can't work with industry standard CTR rates because that will not work. Now I have to have some warnings, a bunch of warnings for you when you're running CTR experiments on your own projects. First one is Google's SERPs are non-linear. That means that there's no longer 10 results and people go from top to bottom in an orderly fashion. Their eyes are darting around in a pinball-like manner. They're just going more randomly than in the past. So you have to factor that in, that the position bias and the ranking position is not the overriding factor. You have to look at special SERP features. Another thing is, of course, seasonality. People will behave differently at different times of the year. Imagine you being a florist and selling flowers online, and there's Mother's Day and there's Valentine's, and so you obviously have different behaviors and different click-through rates for those types of things. So you cannot factor in high CTR on the basis of a particular season. You have to normalize that data. Now, one thing to be mindful of is that SERP layout also shifts and changes over time. So it's a good idea to, should I say scrape your results? Make a record of your search results and make sure that you factor in any potential layout shifts and changes that happen along the way. And this includes competitor snippet changes. So a lot of people run CTR experiments and they're like, okay, we fixed this and we fixed that. And it's like, oh, why didn't it work? Well, it's because perhaps at the same time your competitor did a test or changed a snippet that actually made something amazingly interesting to click on, and it actually took away from your experiment. At the same time, your competitors can enter the search results and exit the search results, and that could skew things up a little bit as well. I'm simply saying new results could be entering that same search page, and some results could disappear out of the search page during the test period. So the next one, CTR data sample size. If you have 100 clicks on your website and one instance of something appearing on position 1, 3 instances something appearing on position 2, 1 instance appearing on position 3, 0 instances of something appearing on position 4, you cannot work with that data. You need at least 10 clicks per ranking position in your data sample to make any sense of anything. Preferably, if you work with very large websites, you'd have a very good statistical model with 100 clicks on per position. So just to keep that in mind. The alternative to using, if you have a website with very few clicks, the alternative is to use industry averages. Those CTR data samples can be retrieved from various sources, and keeping in mind that's just guesswork then. Next one. As we run our search experiments, our rank can fluctuate. We can go from position 1 to position 3 to position 2 back to position 1. And we'll explain what that means for your experiment soon. Another thing is brand exclusion. We've already covered this part. When you're creating your statistical model for the click-through rates, exclude your brand so you're not skewing the expectation above the normal expectation because of the high click-through rate for your own brand. And you have to consider the query intent. We covered that one as well. For example, people landing on your blog will act very differently than people landing on your commercial pages. So we're talking about different page types. And we've got Google being annoying with snippet, title, and description rewriting. There's very little you can do about that, but you can make a record of this taking place and factoring it in your experiments. Because when you're running an experiment, calculating the improvement in your CTR, and Google's actually rewriting your description, well, that experiment's then invalid. You can run it on some other query that doesn't trigger the rewriting. So very complicated process, but you can essentially do it in an Excel spreadsheet. I happen to have a tool free for everyone to use called u.algoroo.com. You log in, connect with your search console, and you run an analysis on all your data. And then once the analysis is finished, you can run an actual experiment. Some people prefer to do this on their own. Some people develop their own tools. I'm just showing you how it looks like on my end. So I click on the experiment tab, click create new experiment, and I just fetch the data for a particular URL. I get its title, I enter the query and the mode of search and the duration of the experiment. And here's the Google Australia relevant to me. So this is the data fetched from the actual site. So we've got the title and the description. Now we've got a case A and case B. Even if you're not using this tool, you can do this manually, of course. But what's important is that you do make a record. This is what happened before, and this is what happened after the change. So you make your adjustment, and you hit create new experiment. And here's what happens. If you remember this list here, where I talk about rank fluctuations. And rank may fluctuate during the duration of your CTR experiment. So what you have to do is you have to split up your test per rank. So if your page appeared on both 1, 2, and 3 position in Google, you have to measure, apples and apples and pears, not merging all the data together. So the CTRs before and after on position 1. So what's happening here? Let's interpret this data. On position 1, the adjustment I made in my snippet. Oh, by the way, when you're running an experiment like this, it's not automatically happening. You actually have to go and change this on your website and make sure that Google indexes it before you start the actual experiment, because it'll not make any difference that you just put it in your records without actually making the change. So once it's indexed, the experiment can run. So what we did is the change we made from here to there, the case B, increased our CTR to nearly 20% from 15%. That's on position 1. On position 2, it's had even more of an impact. I don't know why, but it did. And what's interesting on position 3 is actually slightly decreased our CTR. Not dramatic, you can almost call it the same. So we've got before and after data per ranking position. And this is super important when running your experiments. So when I run large scale studies, I make sure that I have a lot of instances on something appearing on the position. So we have a CTR distribution for a very, very large international website. And we have the number of instances something has appeared on position 1 and 2 and 3. So you can see we've got a lot of data there. So I'm very confident in this data set. So how do we get to experiment ideas? Well, these are our queries. These are the URLs mapped to those queries. These are the clicks. These are the CTRs, the actual CTRs. These are the impressions, the rank, average rank, and this is what we expected the CTR to be. You can already see some weird stuff going on. What's there is a traffic loss. If I wind back all the way to here, this is what I was talking about. Once you map the queries to your URLs and you add up the losses and gains of all the queries cumulative to that URL, you can calculate things on this level. You can actually work out your traffic loss and sort your entire list by URLs and queries that have lost most traffic. That's actually a very good starting point when running your campaign. So let's have a look at this weird query. What's going on? We've got 30 clicks out of 20,000 impressions. Our CTR is 0.5 on position 2. That's incredible. So we expected at least 15% click-through rate, and we only got 0.5 click-through rate. So that's the expectation, and that's the reality. So obviously, this is a very dramatic example just to illustrate a point. I would say this is suspiciously bad. Now let's have a look at query 3. We've got CTR of 2.62, and we expected CTR of 6.78. That's a bit more realistic. We've got a CTR loss of around 4%. So that's what we're looking at. We have a slight deviation, negative deviation from the norm. And our norm, as if you remember, is determined by the averages of your entire data set minus the brand, minus all the non-commercial stuff. So we're looking for page level anomalies now. We're running our title tag analysis for any traffic losses and gains. We're interested in gains as much as losses as well. If you remember, we talked about this part a little bit earlier. So this is one way of detecting those anomalies without writing special scripts for your own stuff. So once I run through my text analysis, for this particular client, I've determined that having country or certain country names in the title was a super negative impact. But when I flipped my analysis again for traffic gains, I found that certain countries actually increased the CTR. So I was a little bit confused about what that meant. But tools are not going to give you answers. Tools will show you what's going on, and then you have to make a decision. Now, positives, questions. Can I brokerage? So those are the types of things that have had super positive impact in this particular circumstance for this type of URL for this client. And I keep saying it's always case specific. It's always specific, not just to industry, not just to the client. It's specific to the analysis level. So here's an exciting thing that you can do. Knowing your rank-based CTRs, you can actually model your traffic projections. So your current traffic is at a certain level. If everything moved one position up, this is what you'd be getting. And if you, in the unicorn scenario of having everything ranking on position 1, that's the full traffic potential of all your current ranking queries. So we can do the same thing with the CTR-based calculations. We're not moving rank anymore, but if we optimize, this is the missing CTR based on the deviations. So this is the click-through that we're getting. This is the click-throughs that we're missing. This is the click-throughs we'll be getting if we fix click-through rates to be as average for your site. Again, this can never happen, but this is your full potential. So if you squeeze, 10 or 20% out of your missing click-throughs, that would make a huge impact on your traffic. And what's exciting about this approach is that you can actually attach financial figures and to your traffic gains and losses based on CTRs. So if you have a bunch of queries and you add the average conversion rate and average order value to this model, you can create a spreadsheet that tells you exactly how much more money you'd be getting out of focusing your SEO efforts on CTR optimization or rank gain even for keyword A versus keyword B or URL A versus URL B. So this is very powerful knowledge to have, especially when you're reporting upward to the management or to your client to justify the SEO activity. So one thing that we can do as the next level is running automatic experiments. So what we're talking about here is having CTR experiments running on their own. So rather than doing things manually, creating case A versus case B, we can simply say, well, just keep an eye on any changes in your snippets. So if title changes or meta description changes on the CMS level or anywhere in your HTML, make a note and then measure the CTR after that. And if CTR drops, make a record of that. So you can then get monthly or weekly reports on CTR drops and gains, and also start mapping patterns. You basically start noticing if absence of presence of certain keywords impact on an automated level your performance positively or negatively. So what's exciting about this process is you can do the non-ranking data. You take the keywords that you don't rank for, such as keywords from your competitors, from your PPC campaigns, or simply running a survey asking people to describe what they would type in Google to find your product. So you inject all those keywords into your existing models where you've developed your CTR projections, and you can actually work out the level of traffic you'd be getting based on the keywords that you're not ranking for. This is a powerful thing to know. So more on this topic. The process that I just described is in depth described on my blog as well. So it's a trilogy on CTR optimization, going into 3 very large segments: same rank, more clicks, CTR, and predictive analytics, which is the part that we've just covered towards the end. And one other resource that I recommend checking out is the CAS model that is proposed to use within Google, which shows you a little bit about how Google uses CTR. I'm not going to suggest that CTR directly influences rankings, but if you had a search engine, you would be crazy not to use CTR to model your algorithms on and use it as a metric. So there's something that Google describes as clicks, attention, and satisfaction. And in fact, in this article, you'll find that Google's actually very happy with people landing on a page, not clicking on anything, getting their results and getting out. That could be very satisfied Google user. And a very old article that I did on title rewriting, where I try to probe into what actually causes the rewriting, so you can get a little bit more data out of that one. And finally, the tool that I use to run my CTR experiments and analysis on the CTR graphs is u.algorithms.com. All right, I think we're good to jump into any Q&As you guys may have.
Okay. Do we have any questions come in, Steve? Well, Bill Allen did comment, great presentation. I think that's a
Thank you.
very fair statement.
I would agree.
You know, as an aside, Steve and I are chatting in the background with little operational points. He says to me, he says, how did we apparently get to know all these smart suckers? So, you know, a valid question, because we've had some great presentations the last couple of days, but this one, I would love to sit down and share a few pints with you too. Uh, Not so much on your landscaping aspects, but your scientific interests. I find fascinating. I'm an electrical engineer by trade. I don't know how in the world I decided to go into work online, but I still find engineering fascinating, and science. But you've taken it a couple notches beyond my knowledge level, and we really enjoyed very much your presentation. We appreciate all the time and effort it takes to put these things together, and hope that you'll be back with us again sometime. Maybe next year you'll find it necessary to hop on a plane and fly over to Mexico and join us.
Fingers crossed. And if in the meantime anyone wants to give it a spin, just get in touch with me, and I'll guide you through the whole process. We can jump on the tool and go through all of your data, and we'll produce those CTR curves for you, and highlight any experiment opportunities, see what your gains and losses are. I know this can be a little bit overwhelming, but I've been doing this for 10 years now, and this is more or less routine for me. So if you're keen, if you have a large website, a lot of data, no strings attached, just get in touch with Dan, and I'll show you around.
That's a pretty substantial offer. Thank you, Dan.
You're most welcome. Thank you.